You don't belong in first class." That single sentence didn't just ruin a flight. It cost a billion-dollar airline its entire future. When Vivian Banks boarded Flight 402 to New York, she wasn't looking for a fight. She was exhausted, underestimated, and dressed in a hoodie. The crew saw a target. The passenger in 1A saw an inconvenience. But none of them realized they were picking a fight with the woman who had signed their paychecks that very morning. They thought she was a nobody. They were wrong. She was the owner. And what happened next wasn't just justice, it was a corporate execution. This is the story of how one moment of disrespect triggered the most brutal, satisfying karma in aviation history. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the private lounge at Chicago O'Hare, blurring the runway lights into streaks of neon blue and orange. Inside the Horizon Air exclusive lounge, the air smelled of stale espresso and expensive cologne. It was a smell Vivian Banks knew well, though usually she experienced it from the other side of the glass walls in the boardroom. Vivian adjusted the hood of her oversized beige cashmere sweater. She wasn't dressed like the CEO of a Fortune 500 logistics company today. She wasn't dressed like the woman who had just quietly acquired a majority stake in Horizon Air via a shell corporation named VB Holdings 48 hours ago. Today she was just tired. She wore leggings, clean white sneakers, and a baseball cap pulled low. She had been awake for 36 hours negotiating the merger that would save this failing airline from bankruptcy, and all she wanted was the lie-flat seat she had paid for in first class. She walked up to the counter in the lounge, her digital boarding pass illuminated on her phone screen. The agent behind the desk, a man named Todd with a perfectly gelled side part, didn't look up. He was too busy laughing at something on his personal cell phone. "Excuse me," Vivian said softly. Her voice was raspy from fatigue. "I'd like to check if Flight 402 is on time." Todd finally looked up. His eyes did a quick, dismissive scan. He saw the hoodie. He saw the brown skin. He saw the lack of designer luggage. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of bored irritation. "The board is right there, miss," Todd said, pointing vaguely over her shoulder without making eye contact. "And this lounge is for first class and diamond status members only. The general waiting area is out the doors and to the left." Vivian blinked. She didn't have the energy for anger, not yet. "I know where I am. I'm in first class. Seat 1F. Todd let out a short, incredulous huff. He reached out his hand, snapping his fingers impatiently. "Boarding pass." Vivian held out her phone. Todd snatched the device from her hand, his thumb swiping aggressively across her screen. He stared at the QR code, then at the name, then back at her. Vivian Banks. The name didn't ring a bell for him. Why would it? He was low-level ground staff, and the acquisition hadn't been announced to the press yet. "System says 1F barely," Todd muttered, handing the phone back with a grimace. "Probably an upgrade glitch. Don't get used to it. Flight's delayed 20 minutes. You can sit over there by the wall. Try not to disturb the other guests." He gestured toward a dark corner near the restrooms, far away from the buffet and the comfortable leather armchairs where men in suits were sipping scotch. Vivian took her phone back, her grip tightening slightly. "Thank you, Todd," she said, reading his name tag deliberately. She didn't sit by the restrooms. She walked straight to the center of the room and sat in a plush armchair directly across from a man who was loudly berating someone on the phone. This was Preston Hayes. Vivian recognized him instantly from the tabloids. He was the fail son of the Hayes real estate empire, a man known more for his DU-is and Twitter rants than any actual business acumen. Preston was wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, and he was currently screaming into his iPhone. "I don't care what the zoning laws say, Jerry. Just pay the inspector off. I need that permit by Monday or you're fired." He slammed the phone down and looked up, catching Vivian staring at him. He sneered, his lip curling in disgust. "Can I help you?" Preston asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "The cleaning staff usually waits until the room is empty to start working." Vivian didn't flinch. She crossed her legs and leaned back. "I'm not cleaning staff. I'm flying first class, just like you." Preston laughed, a harsh barking sound that drew the attention of the room. "You first class, please. Affirmative action really is ruining everything, isn't it? Enjoy the legroom while it lasts, sweetheart. People like you never keep seats like that for long." Vivian felt that familiar heat rising in her chest, the slow burn of indignation she had fought her entire career. She had built VB Logistics from a garage startup into a global empire. She had just saved this man's preferred airline from liquidation. And yet, to him, she was just people like you. "Be careful, Mr. Hayes," Vivian said calmly. "Turbulence hits when you least expect it." Preston rolled his eyes and turned away, dismissing her entirely. He waved at a server. "Get me another scotch, and get some air freshener over here. It smells like poverty." Vivian pulled out her phone. She opened a secure messaging app and typed a quick message to her chief legal officer, David Thorne. "Draft the paperwork. Trigger the termination clause for the executive loyalty program. And get me the manifest for Flight 402. David replied instantly. "On it. Is there a problem?" Vivian looked at Preston Hayes, who was now verbally abusing the server for not bringing enough ice. "Not yet," she typed back. "But the storm is coming." Boarding was chaotic. The gate agents were overwhelmed, and the priority lane was a mess of jostling suits and rolling briefcases. When Vivian finally made it to the jet bridge, she felt a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Hold up," a voice barked. She turned to see a flight attendant standing guard at the aircraft door. Her name tag read Brenda. She had blonde hair sprayed into a helmet-hard bob and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Zone 1 only right now," Brenda said, blocking the doorway with her body. "Economy boards in 10 minutes. Vivian held up her phone again. "I am Zone 1, Seat 1F. Brenda squinted at the screen, her expression souring. She looked Vivian up and down, making a show of inspecting her sneakers and hoodie. "Let me see your ID." "You didn't ask the man in front of me for ID," Vivian pointed out. The man in front of her had been Preston Hayes. "He is a Platinum Legacy member," Brenda snapped. "I know who he is. I don't know you. ID, now." Vivian retrieved her driver's license. Brenda studied it for an uncomfortably long time, bending it slightly as if checking for a fake. Finally, she shoved it back at Vivian. "Fine, go. But put that bag in the overhead immediately. We don't want clutter at the feet in first." Vivian walked onto the plane. The first-class cabin on the Horizon Air. 747 was dated but spacious. Wide leather seats, fake wood paneling, and the soft clinking of glassware. She located seat 1F, a window seat on the right side. But someone was already sitting in it. A young woman with bright pink hair and a designer handbag on her lap was settled comfortably into 1F, tapping away on a tablet. Next to her in the aisle seat, 1E, sat Preston Hayes. Vivian checked her boarding pass again. 1F, definitely her seat. "Excuse me," Vivian said politely. "I think you're in my seat." The woman with pink hair looked up, popping a stick of gum. "Huh." Preston Hayes looked over his face, twisting into a smirk when he recognized Vivian. Oh, God. You again. Go find a seat in the back. We're busy. I have seat 1F, Vivian said, her voice firming. You are in 1E. This young lady is in 1F. That is my assigned seat. Preston waved a hand dismissively. This is Tiffany. She's with me. We wanted to sit together, so she took the window. You can have her seat. It's back there somewhere. 4B, 5C, whatever. Vivian looked at the boarding pass sticking out of Tiffany's purse. It read 24B, Economy. She has an economy ticket, Vivian said. I paid full fare for first class. I am not trading a first-class window seat for a middle seat in economy. Preston laughed, shaking his head as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler. Look, honey, I'm Preston Hayes. My family practically built this airport. I spend more on champagne in a month than you make in a year. Tiffany stays. You move. End of discussion. Vivian pressed the call button. Brenda, the flight attendant from the door, appeared instantly. She rushed to Preston's side, her face beaming with an obsequious smile. Is everything all right, Mr. Hayes? Can I get you a pre-departure drink? Brenda, darling, Preston purred. This individual is harassing us. She's trying to kick Tiffany out of her seat. Brenda spun around to face Vivian, the smile vanishing instantly. Ma'am, I need you to step away from Mr. Hayes. You are causing a disturbance. I am not causing a disturbance, Vivian said, keeping her voice dangerously level. This man's companion is in my assigned seat. I would like to sit down. Brenda sighed a loud, theatrical sound of exhaustion. Ma'am, couples sit together in first class. It's standard protocol. Mr. Hayes is a valued flyer. If he wants his guest next to him, we accommodate that. Not when the guest has an economy ticket and the displaced passenger paid for first, Vivian countered. Check the manifest, Brenda. Seat 1F belongs to Vivian Banks. Brenda narrowed her eyes. Are you refusing to follow crew instructions? The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. Other passengers were watching now. Whispers rippled through the cabin. Who is she? Why doesn't she just move? I am asking you to enforce the airline's own policy, Vivian said. I paid $4,000 for this seat. I intend to sit in it. Brenda took a step closer, invading Vivian's personal space. Listen to me closely. You are disrupting the boarding process. We have a very strict policy against unruly passengers. Now you can take seat 24B, or you can get off this plane. Those are your options. Vivian looked at Brenda. She looked at Preston, who was grinning like a shark. She looked at Tiffany, who was ignoring the whole thing and scrolling on Instagram. This was it. The moment of choice. Vivian could show her hand now. She could pull out the acquisition papers, call the CEO of the parent company, and have them all thrown off. But that was too easy. If she revealed herself now, they would apologize. They would grovel. They would say it was a misunderstanding. They wouldn't learn a thing. They needed to believe they had won. They needed to dig the hole so deep that when the dirt finally fell back in, it would bury them completely. Vivian took a deep breath. She smoothed the front of her hoodie. Fine, Vivian said softly. I'll take 24B. Preston clapped his hands mockingly. Smart choice. Now run along. The adults are talking. Brenda smirked, pointing toward the curtain separating the classes. Back of the bus, honey. Keep walking until you hit the toilets. Vivian turned and walked down the aisle. Her face was a mask of stone, but her mind was racing. She pulled out her phone again. David, she texted. Change of plans. Do not announce the acquisition tomorrow morning. Delay the press release. Why? David replied. Because I need to make a few personnel changes first, Vivian wrote, starting with the flight crew on Flight 402, and look into the Hayes Estate's credit lines with our banking partners. Freeze them. She found seat 24B. It was sandwiched between a man eating a pungent tuna sandwich and a crying baby. The seat didn't recline. The tray table was broken. Vivian sat down and buckled her belt. She closed her eyes. Enjoy the champagne, Preston, she thought. It's the last expensive drink you're going to have for a very long time. The plane taxied to the runway. The engines roared to life. As they lifted off into the stormy Chicago sky, Vivian Banks didn't sleep. She spent the entire flight drafting a memo on her phone. The subject line was simple: immediate restructuring, but the humiliation wasn't over. About 2 hours into the flight, Vivian needed water. Her call button had been ignored for 30 minutes. She unbuckled and walked toward the galley in the middle of the plane. Brenda was there gossiping with another flight attendant, a younger man named Kevin. "Can you believe her?" Brenda was saying, laughing. "Thinking she could bump Preston Hayes. The nerve of these people. I should have had the marshals drag her off." "She looked like she came from the shelter." Kevin chuckled. "Did you see those sneakers?" Vivian stepped into the galley. "Excuse me. Can I have a bottle of water?" Brenda jumped, then rolled her eyes. "We're busy. Go sit down. We'll do a beverage service in an hour." "I'm dehydrated," Vivian said. "I just want a water." Brenda grabbed a half-empty plastic cup from the counter trash from another passenger and filled it with tap water from the galley sink. She slammed it down on a napkin. "Here, now go back to your seat before I write you up for disobeying crew orders. Again." Vivian looked at the tap water. She looked at Brenda. "Thank you, Brenda," Vivian said. "You've been very illuminating." Yeah. Move it." Brenda waved her away. Vivian returned to seat 24B. She didn't drink the water. She sat in the dark, the turbulence shaking the plane, and waited. They had no idea who was on this plane. They had no idea that the shelter they joked about was a multi-million-dollar penthouse in Manhattan. They had no idea that the nobody in 24B currently owned the mortgage on the very aircraft they were flying in. The Karma wasn't going to just hit back, it was going to nuke them from orbit. And the best part, the flight was landing in New York, the headquarters of Horizon Air. The board of directors was waiting for the new owner to arrive to sign the final transition documents. Vivian smiled in the dark. This meeting is going to be interesting. The descent into New York's JFK Airport was rough. The storm that had delayed them in Chicago had beaten them east, and Flight 402 bucked violently through thick grey clouds. In seat 24, Vivian held onto the armrests, her knuckles white. It wasn't fear of flying, it was barely contained rage. Every bump in the turbulence was a reminder of the plush, stable seat up front that she had paid for and been denied. When the wheels finally slammed onto the tarmac, a collective sigh of relief rippled through economy. Up in first class, however, the champagne had continued flowing until the last possible second. As the plane taxied to the gate, the fasten seatbelt sign dinged off. The curtain between cabins was immediately whipped shut by Kevin, the junior flight attendant, reinforcing the caste system one last time. The first-class passengers were given ample time to gather their belongings and deplane leisurely before the cattle call in the back was allowed to move. Vivian waited. She watched through the crack in the curtain as Preston Hayes stood up, stretched, and loudly complained about the horrendous 40-minute delay. He grabbed his Toomey carry-on, then hauled Tiffany's Louis Vuitton duffel down for her. They were the first ones off the plane. 10 minutes passed. Finally, the economy passengers began the slow shuffle toward the front. Vivian, seated near the back, was among the last to reach the exit door. Brenda was standing by the cockpit door, smiling fake smiles at the departing passengers. "Bye-bye. Thanks for flying Horizon. Bye-bye." When she saw Vivian approaching, the smile dropped faster than the cabin pressure in an emergency. "Took you long enough," Brenda snapped. "The cleaning crew is waiting." Vivian stopped directly in front of her. She looked tired, her hoodie slightly rumpled, but her eyes were sharp as flint. "What is your full name, Brenda?" Brenda recoiled as if slapped. "Excuse me." "Your full name and employee ID number. I require them for the formal complaint I will be filing." Brenda let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She glanced at Kevin, who was standing nearby, smirking. "Oh, honey," Brenda sneered, stepping closer so her perfume, something cloying and floral, filled Vivian's nose. "You think anyone cares about a complaint from 24B? We get complaints from people like you every day. They go straight into the shredder. You were disruptive. You refused crew instructions. If you file a complaint, I'll file a counter-report stating you were threatening me. Guess who the airline will believe, the 20-year veteran flight lead or the troublemaker in the hoodie?" Vivian held her gaze. "You're right, Brenda. They probably wouldn't believe me. But they will believe the flight data recorder." Brenda frowned, confused. "What? Every conversation in the galley is recorded." Vivian lied smoothly. It wasn't strictly true for the galley, but Brenda's sudden pallor suggested she believed it. "And I'm sure the cockpit voice recorder picked up the commotion when you allowed a non-paying passenger to hijack seat 1F. For a split second, fear flickered behind Brenda's heavy mascara. But her arrogance quickly reasserted itself. "Get off my plane," Brenda hissed, pointing to the jet bridge. "Before I call airport security and have you escorted out of the terminal in zip ties." Vivian didn't move. She reached into her pocket. "He thinks you're stealing something," Kevin suddenly chirped up from behind Brenda. "She's reaching for something." Brenda grabbed Vivian's wrist. "Show me what's in your pocket. Did you take a first-class amenity kit on your way through? Those are $20. Vivian ripped her wrist free with surprising strength. She slowly pulled her hand out of her pocket. It was empty. "I was reaching for my phone to check the time," Vivian said, icily. "Assaulting a passenger. That's a felony, Brenda." Brenda took a step back, flustered. "Just go. Get out." Vivian stepped onto the jet bridge. The cool, damp air of New York hit her face. She walked up the ramp into the terminal and didn't look back. She wasn't heading to baggage claim. Instead, Vivian turned left toward a nondescript security door, usually reserved for diplomats and very high-level VIPs. She tapped her phone against a scanner next to the door. It beeped green and clicked open. Waiting on the other side, on the restricted tarmac level, was a sleek black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows. A driver in a sharp black suit was holding the rear door open. "Ms. Banks," the driver said, bowing his head respectfully. "Welcome to New York. Mr. Thorne is waiting for you at headquarters. The board is assembled." Vivian slid into the back seat of the Escalade. The interior smelled of rich leather, a stark contrast to the stale air of economy. "Take me to the tower," Vivian commanded, "and call David. Tell him to have security meet me in the lobby. I have a feeling I'm going to need them to get past the front desk." The Escalade sped off across the tarmac, weaving between baggage carts and fueling trucks, heading toward the towering glass monolith of the Horizon Air Global Headquarters that loomed over JFK. The storm clouds were breaking, and a shaft of sunlight hit the top of the building. It was time to go to work. The Horizon Air headquarters lobby was a cavernous space of polished marble and aggressive air conditioning. A massive stylized globe hung from the ceiling, surrounded by model airplanes. Behind a reception desk that looked like the prow of a ship sat two receptionists who looked like they had been cloned from the same vat that produced Brenda. Vivian pushed through the revolving doors. She still wore her sneakers, leggings, and the beige hoodie. She carried no bag, having checked her small suitcase. She walked straight toward the elevator bank, reserved for executives. "Excuse me, miss." One of the receptionists, whose nameplate read Stacy, was practically vaulting over the desk. "Where do you think you're going?" Stacy demanded, blocking Vivian's path to the elevators. Her voice echoed in the quiet lobby. "Top floor, boardroom A," Vivian said calmly. Stacy looked her up and down, her expression a carbon copy of Todd's in Chicago and Brenda's on the plane. It was the look of someone trained to identify wealth solely by logos, and failing to see any, on Vivian classified her as a threat. "Are you delivering food?" Stacy asked, looking around for a bag. "Deliveries go to the service entrance in the back alley. You cannot be in the executive lobby." "I'm not delivering food. I have a meeting." "With who?" Stacy scoffed. "The janitorial manager that's on the basement level." "With Arthur Pendleton, the CEO." Stacy laughed out loud. "Mr. Pendleton is in a critical board meeting. He is absolutely not meeting with—" She gestured vaguely at Vivian's attire. You need to leave immediately. You are trespassing." Stacy reached for the phone on her desk. "Security to the lobby. We have an intruder." Vivian didn't budge. She just checked her watch. "You might want to hold that call, Stacy. You're about to be very embarrassed." At that moment, the far elevator doors pinged open. Two large men in dark suits stepped out, flanking a sharply dressed man with silver hair and wire-frame glasses. It was David Thorne, Vivian's chief legal officer. David saw Vivian being blocked by the sputtering receptionist and strode across the lobby. "Ms. Banks," David said, his voice booming, ignoring Stacy entirely. "Apologies for the delay. The board is waiting." Stacy froze the phone halfway to her ear. "Mr. Thorne, you know this person?" David turned a withering glare on the receptionist. "This person, Stacy, is Vivian Banks, the CEO of VB Logistics." He paused for effect. "And as of 9:00 a.m. this morning, the new majority owner of Horizon Air. She is your boss's boss's boss." Stacy's jaw literally dropped. The color drained from her face so fast she looked ready to faint. She looked from the hoodie to David's serious face, trying to compute the data. Vivian stepped past the paralyzed receptionist. "Don't worry about security, Stacy," Vivian said softly over her shoulder. "I'll be making plenty of changes to the staff roster soon enough. You're on the list." She entered the elevator with David and the security detail. The doors closed on Stacy's horrified expression. "Rough flight?" David asked as the elevator shot upward. "You have no idea," Vivian murmured, pulling off her baseball cap and shaking out her hair. "The culture in this company isn't just toxic, David. It's gangrenous. We need to amputate." "The paperwork is finalized," David said, handing her a leather portfolio. "Pendleton and the board know the company was sold to VB Holdings, but they don't know who is behind it. They're expecting a corporate raider type, an old white guy in a Brioni suit." Vivian smiled tightly. "Let's not disappoint them." The elevator doors opened onto the top floor. It was silent plush carpet muffling their footsteps. They approached double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. Inside boardroom. 12 men were seated around a table made of reclaimed aircraft aluminum. The atmosphere was tense. Arthur Pendleton, the current CEO, was pacing at the head of the table. He was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a month. His tie loosened, sweating despite the cool room. "They're late," Pendleton muttered, checking his gold Rolex. "This VB Holdings Group. Arrogant already. Who are they? Why all the secrecy?" "Maybe they got delayed," another board member suggested. "The weather out of Chicago was terrible. Flight 402 just landed." The mahogany doors burst open. Every head turned. They expected David Thorne, the lawyer who had brokered the deal. They did not expect the black woman in a hoodie and sneakers, who walked in first, radiating an almost palpable aura of command. "Gentlemen," David Thorne said from behind her, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "May I present the president and CEO of VB Holdings and the new chairwoman of Horizon Air, Ms. Vivian Banks." The silence stretched. It was thick, uncomfortable, and filled with the sound of 12 powerful men simultaneously recalibrating their assumptions. Arthur Pendleton stopped pacing. He stared at Vivian, then looked at David, as if this were some sort of practical joke. "This," Pendleton stammered, gesturing faintly at Vivian. "This is the buyer." Vivian walked slowly to the head of the table. Pendleton, realizing he was in her spot, scrambled out of the way like a frightened rabbit. Vivian stood behind the chair. She didn't sit yet. She placed her hands flat on the table and leaned forward, scanning the faces of the men responsible for running the airline into the ground. "You seem surprised, Arthur," Vivian said, her voice low and smooth, filling the room. "Well, Ms. Banks, it's just unexpected." Pendleton managed, trying to regain his composure. "We were expecting someone who looks like you," Vivian finished for him. Pendleton reddened. "I didn't mean—" "Have a seat, Arthur," Vivian commanded. He sat in the nearest available chair. Vivian finally sat down at the head of the table. She spun the chair slowly. "Before we discuss the future of this airline," Vivian began, "we need to discuss its present, specifically the customer experience." She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. The massive monitor built into the far wall flickered to life. It displayed a passenger manifest. "Flight 402, ORD to JFK." "I just flew in on Flight 402, Vivian said. "Incognito. To see how your operation runs when you don't know the boss is watching." The board members exchanged nervous glances. "And what did you find?" one brave soul asked. "I found," Vivian said, her eyes hardening, "that your airline is a disgrace. I was profiled by your ground staff. I was thrown out of my paid first-class seat by an entitled brat named Preston Hayes because your flight crew was too starstruck and cowardly to enforce your own policies. And I was verbally assaulted and accused of theft by your lead flight attendant when I dared to ask for water." The room was deathly silent. Pendleton looked sick. "Preston Hayes," Pendleton squeaked. "His family are major investors." "Not anymore," David Thorne interjected smoothly. "As of 10 minutes ago, we've invoked the morality clause in our investor agreement regarding Mr. Hayes's public conduct. His shares are being bought back at market value, which, given the state of this company, is pennies." Vivian leaned back. "Vivian, that was just the appetizer, gentlemen. Now for the main course." Arthur, pull up the employee file for a flight attendant named Brenda currently on duty on Flight 402. Pendleton fumbled with his laptop, his hands shaking. The screen changed, showing Brenda's file. 20 years, Vivian read. Several customer complaints for rudeness, all dismissed by middle management. Why? Well, Pendleton stammered. "Brenda she's tough, but she manages the cabin effectively. We don't want to undermine our crew. She runs the cabin like a prison warden, profiting from the inmates," Vivian snapped. "She is a symptom of the disease that killed this airline. A culture of arrogance, discrimination, and complete lack of accountability. A culture that starts in this very room." She stood up again. "David, terminate Brenda's employment. Effective immediately. Cause gross misconduct, customer harassment, and failure to adhere to company ticketing policy. No severance." David nodded, tapping on his tablet. "Done." "Furthermore," Vivian continued, turning her gaze to Pendleton, "Arthur, you have allowed this culture to fester. You valued legacy passengers like Preston Hayes, a man who contributes nothing but bad press over paying customers who don't look the part. You've run this company based on optics, not ethics." Pendleton looked pale. "Ms. Banks, please. I can turn this around. Give me 6 months." Vivian shook her head slowly. "You don't have 6 minutes." She pulled a folded document from her hoodie pocket and slid it down the long table. It stopped perfectly in front of Arthur Pendleton. "Your resignation, Arthur. Sign it, and then get out of my building." Back at Gate 42, the atmosphere was growing toxic, though Brenda didn't know it yet. The last of the economy passengers had trudged off the jet bridge, leaving the empty husk of the 747 behind them. Brenda stood in the forward galley, reapplying her lipstick in a small mirror. She felt a smug sense of satisfaction. The flight had been rough, the turbulence sickening, but she had maintained order. She had put that woman in seat 24B in her place. To Brenda, the hierarchy of the skies was sacred. You had the people who mattered, the Preston Hayeses of the world, and the people who were lucky to be allowed on board. Her job, as she saw it, was to protect the former from the latter. Kevin, the junior flight attendant, was shoving metal bins into the cart slots with unnecessary force. He looked nervous. "Brenda?" Kevin said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you think we should file that report? The one about the woman in the hoodie?" Brenda smacked her lips, checking the shade of red. "Absolutely. I'm going to flag her profile for a lifetime ban. Accusing me of theft. Threatening the crew she's done. I'll write it up as soon as we get to the crew lounge. I want her name in the no-fly database by dinner." She smoothed her uniform skirt and grabbed her purse. "Come on. Let's get out of here. I need a drink." They walked up the jet bridge, their roller bags clicking rhythmically on the metal slats. When they emerged into the terminal, the gate area was strangely crowded with airport security and a suit-clad man Brenda didn't recognize. Usually the gate agents, Stacy's counterparts, would be chatting, closing out the flight. But today the 2 agents at the podium were standing rigid, their faces pale. The man in the suit stepped forward as Brenda exited the bridge. He was tall, holding a tablet with a lanyard that identified him as Human Resources, Crisis Management. "Brenda Miller?" the man asked. His tone wasn't a question. It was a statement. Brenda stopped, a smile playing on her lips. She assumed this was about the unruly passenger. Finally, management was being proactive. "That's me," Brenda said, straightening her posture. "If this is about the woman in 24B, I have my statement ready. She was aggressive, non-compliant, and Miss Miller, please hand over your company identification badge and your airport SIDAA security clearance." The man interrupted, his voice devoid of emotion. Brenda blinked. The noise of the terminal, the announcements, the rolling suitcases, the chatter seemed to drop away. "Excuse me. Your employment with Horizon Air has been terminated effective immediately," the man said, extending his hand. "We are here to escort you out of the secure area." Kevin, standing behind Brenda, gasped and took a step back, physically distancing himself from her. Brenda let out a short, hysterical laugh. "Is this a joke? I've been with this airline for 20 years. You can't just terminate me. I have union rights. I have a clean record. That woman, she lied. She's a nobody." The HR manager tapped his tablet. "This order comes directly from the board of directors and the chairwoman's office. It is not up for debate. Cause for termination is listed as gross misconduct, discrimination, and violation of Federal Aviation Transport contracts." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so the gawking passengers nearby wouldn't hear every word, though they were definitely filming. "Ms. Miller, you kicked the new owner of the airline out of her seat. You denied her water, and you threatened to have her arrested. There is no union rep in the world who can save you from this." Brenda felt the blood drain from her face. Her knees turned to water, the owner. The image of the woman in the beige hoodie flashed in her mind. The cheap sneakers, the quiet demeanor, the way she had said, "Wait until the storm hits." "No," Brenda whispered, her voice trembling. "That's impossible. She was in economy." "Badge. Now," the man commanded. With shaking hands, Brenda unclipped her ID from her lapel. She handed it over. It felt like handing over a limb. "And yours as well, mister. Kevin O'Connell," the HR manager said, looking over Brenda's shoulder. Kevin's eyes bulged. "Me, I didn't do anything. I just stood there. Complicity is misconduct," the manager said. "You watched a senior attendant abuse a passenger and violate policy, and you laughed. Badge." Kevin handed his over, looking like he was about to vomit. "Security will escort you to the curb," the manager said, turning his back on them. "Do not return to the premises. Your personal items in the crew lounge will be mailed to you." Two uniformed TSA officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, sir, this way." Brenda walked through the terminal. She had ruled like a queen for 2 decades. But she wasn't walking with her head held high, pulling her roller bag with authority. She was being marched out like a criminal flanked by guards. Passengers they had just served on Flight 402 were waiting at the baggage carousel. As Brenda and Kevin were paraded past the glass walls of the baggage claim, heads turned. Whispers started. "Hey, isn't that the flight attendant who was screaming at that lady?" someone asked. "Yeah, looks like she's getting arrested," another laughed. Brenda Miller, who had spent her life judging people by their status, was now the lowest status person in JFK International Airport. She was stripped of her wings, her job, and her dignity, all because she couldn't see the power beneath a hoodie. While Brenda was facing her professional execution, Preston Hayes was discovering a different kind of hell. He and Tiffany had breezed through the terminal, bypassing the baggage claim, because naturally Preston had a service that delivered his luggage directly to his hotel. He was currently standing at the counter of the elite exotic car rental kiosk, tapping his fingers impatiently on the glass. "I don't want the Porsche Cayenne," Preston spat at the terrified clerk. "I specifically reserved the Aston Martin DB11. I made the reservation 3 weeks ago. I'm so sorry, Mr. Hayes," the clerk stammered, typing frantically. "I see the reservation here, but the system is giving me a block." "A block," Preston laughed, a sound that was pure entitlement. "Do you know who I am?" "My family practically owns the asphalt this airport is built on. Override it." "I can't, sir. It says, corporate hold, do not rent." Preston slammed his hand on the counter. "This is ridiculous. Fine. Forget the Aston. Just give me the S-Class, and be quick about it. I have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin." "Okay. Let me try," the clerk said, swiping Preston's heavy metal black card, the one linked to the Hayes family trust. The machine beeped, a harsh buzzing sound. "Declined." The clerk looked up, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. The card was declined." Preston's face turned a violent shade of red. "Try it again. It's a chip error. That card has a limit higher than your life expectancy." The clerk swiped again. "Declined. Report stolen," it says. "Report stolen, sir," the clerk whispered, shrinking back. I'm supposed to confiscate the card." "You touch that card, and I'll have your hand cut off," Preston snarled. He snatched the card back and pulled out another one, his personal Platinum Amex. He tapped it. Declined. He pulled out a Visa Infinite. Declined. Tiffany, who had been busy taking selfies by a cardboard cutout of a Ferrari, finally looked up. "Babe, what's taking so long? The Uber app isn't working on my phone either. It says the payment method is invalid." Preston felt a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. This wasn't a glitch. This was a targeted strike. He grabbed his phone and dialed his father's private number. It rang once, twice, then clicked to voicemail. But it wasn't his father's voice. It was a generic, automated message. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." "What the hell is going on?" Preston shouted, causing several people in the rental line to turn and stare. He dialed his family's private banker, a man named Gerald, who had cleaned up Preston's messes for a decade. "Gerald," Preston barked when the line connected. "My cards are down, all of them. Fix it, now." "Mr. Hayes," Gerald's voice was icy cold. "I was just about to call you. The bank has received a federal freeze order on the Hayes family trust assets." "A freeze order from who?" "From the SEC in conjunction with a fraud investigation initiated by VB Logistics," Gerald said. "Apparently there were some irregularities in the liquidity reports regarding your family's investment in Horizon Air. The new majority owner triggered a full forensic audit about 20 minutes ago." "VB Logistics," Preston screamed. "Who the hell are they? They are the new owners of Horizon Air, Mr. Hayes, and they have also flagged your personal accounts for review due to misuse of corporate assets, specifically utilizing investor perks for personal gain while the stock was plummeting." "This is insane. I'm suing." "You can't sue Preston," Gerald said, his voice losing its professional veneer. "Your retainers are frozen. You have no money. I'm resigning as your counsel effectively immediately. Don't call this number again." The line went dead. Preston stood there, the phone slipping from his sweaty grip. He had no car. He had no money. He had no lawyer. "Babe," Tiffany whined, walking over. "People are staring. Just buy the car so we can go." "Shut up, Tiffany," Preston snapped. "Excuse me, sir." Preston turned around. 2 police officers were standing behind him, their hands resting on their belts. Next to them was the rental car clerk, looking vindicated. "We got a report of a disturbance," the older officer said, "and the clerk says you refused to surrender a credit card that was flagged as stolen property." "It's my card," Preston yelled, his composure fracturing completely. "It's my family's money." "You can't touch me." "Sir, lower your voice," the officer warned. "I need you to hand over the card and provide identification." "I am Preston Hayes." "I don't care if you're the Pope," the officer said, unclipping his handcuffs. "You're causing a scene in a federal transport terminal. Hand over the card or you're going into the holding cell." Preston looked around. A crowd had gathered. Phones were out. The cameras were rolling. He realized with a sick, sinking feeling that he was about to be the star of a viral video not for his wealth, but for his meltdown. He slowly handed the heavy black metal card to the officer. "And the other ones," the officer said. "The system flagged 3 attempts." Preston handed over his entire wallet. He was stripped bare, "Can we go now?" Tiffany asked the police officer, her voice trembling. "I'm not with him. I mean, I barely know him." Preston whipped his head around. "Tiffany, we've been dating for 6 months." Tiffany shrugged, stepping away from him. "My Uber app works now that I switched it to my dad's card. Bye, Preston. Call me when you get your money back." She turned on her heel and walked away, the click-clack of her heels echoing like gunshots. Preston Hayes stood alone in the center of the rental car lobby, watched by strangers guarded by police, and utterly broke. And then he saw her. Through the glass doors of the terminal entrance, walking toward a waiting black SUV, was the woman from the plane, Vivian Banks. She wasn't looking at him. She was on the phone, looking calm, powerful, and completely unbothered. She stopped for a moment, adjusted her hoodie, and glanced through the glass. Their eyes locked. Vivian didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just looked at him with a profound, crushing indifference. She had destroyed his entire life in under an hour, and to her it was just a Tuesday. Preston opened his mouth to scream, to beg, to shout something, but the officer grabbed his arm. "Let's go, Mr. Hayes. The station is this way." As Preston was led away in handcuffs, kicking and screaming about his father's lawyers, Vivian stepped into her car and drove away. But the story wasn't over. The internet operates faster than a 747, and the video from inside the plane, the one Vivian didn't even know existed, was about to go live. The collapse of the old Horizon Air didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened on TikTok. While Vivian was dismantling the C-suite, a 19-year-old student named Leo, who had been sitting in seat 2A across from Preston and Tiffany, uploaded a video he had surreptitiously filmed during boarding. He captioned it, "Flight attendant kicks actual owner of airline out of first class for entitled rich jerk." Wait for the end. By the time Vivian left the headquarters that evening, the video had 14 million views. The footage was damning. It showed the sneering disrespect on Brenda's face. It captured Preston Hayes' arrogant laugh as he waved Vivian toward economy. It showed Vivian's calm, almost terrifying composure as she walked away. The internet did what the internet does best. It went to war. Within hours, #BoycottHorizon was the #1 trend globally. But then the news broke about what happened after the plane landed. The press release from VB Holdings hit the wires at 6:00 p.m. Horizon Air. Board dissolved. CEO. Arthur Pendleton resigns. Historic restructuring under new chairwoman Vivian Banks. The narrative shifted instantly. It went from a story of humiliation to a saga of ultimate vindication. 2 days later, Vivian stood at a podium in the main hangar of JFK. Behind her stood a Boeing 787, but the old Horizon logo had been stripped off. The press corps was packed in tight cameras, flashing blindingly. Vivian wore a sharp navy suit today, but she kept the same quiet intensity she'd had in the hoodie. "For too long," Vivian spoke into the microphone, her voice echoing through the hangar. "Air travel has been a class system designed to humiliate the many, to pamper the few. 2 days ago, I experienced that culture firsthand on my own aircraft. It ends today." She gestured to the screen behind her. "The employees involved in the incident on Flight 402 have been terminated, but they were merely symptoms of a rotten root. We are instituting a new policy effective immediately, the dignity standard. Every passenger from seat 1A to 35F is a guest in my house. If you cannot treat them with respect, you cannot work for this company." The stock price of the newly rebranded Banks Horizon didn't tank. It soared. People loved the justice, They loved the undercover boss nature of it all. Vivian Banks wasn't just a CEO anymore. She was a folk hero. But for the antagonists, the reality was far grimmer. Brenda Miller sat in the small, cramped office at a Tempe agency in Queens 3 weeks later. She had applied to 4 other airlines. All of them had flagged her file. The video of her sneering at Vivian Banks was the first thing that popped up when anyone Googled her name. "I see you have 20 years of experience," the temp agent said, looking at Brenda with a mixture of pity and recognition. "But given the publicity, we can't place you in customer service roles or hospitality." "I need a job," Brenda said, her voice hollow. "I have a mortgage." "We have an opening," the agent said, sliding a paper across the desk. "Night shift, industrial cleaning services for the subway system. It pays minimum wage." Brenda looked at the paper. It was hard, dirty, thankless work. The kind of work she used to look down on. The kind of work she thought was for other people. "I'll take it," she whispered. Preston Hayes fared no better. The investigation triggered by Vivian's team uncovered a massive embezzlement scheme within the Hayes family trust. His father, desperate to avoid prison, cut a deal with the SEC that involved liquidating assets and, crucially, cutting Preston off completely to show good faith in restructuring the family ethics. Preston was last seen not in an Aston Martin, but on a public bus in Jersey City, heading to a court-ordered community service shift, picking up trash along the highway. When a fellow passenger recognized him from the viral video and asked, "Hey, aren't you the first-class guy?" Preston pulled his cap down and turned away, staring out the window at the rain. 6 months later, Vivian Banks was flying again. She was on a flight to London to open a new hub. She boarded the plane, a brand new Airbus A350, with the new Banks Horizon livery. She walked onto the jet bridge, dressed comfortably in slacks and a sweater. The flight attendant at the door was a young woman named Sarah. She looked at Vivian's boarding pass. "Welcome aboard, Miss Banks," Sarah said, smiling genuinely. "Right this way to 1A. Vivian walked into the first-class cabin. It was beautiful, but as she settled into seat 1A, she noticed an elderly woman struggling to lift a heavy bag into the overhead bin near row 4. The flight attendants were busy in the galley prepping drinks. Without hesitating, Vivian unbuckled her seatbelt. She walked back to row 4. "Let me help you with that," Vivian said softly. The old woman looked surprised. "Oh, thank you, dear. It's so heavy." Vivian hoisted the bag easily and clicked the bin shut. "You're very kind," the woman said, patting Vivian's arm. "Do you work for the airline?" Vivian smiled. She looked at the logo on the napkin in the woman's hand. She looked at the respectful, diverse crew working the aisles. She thought of Brenda scrubbing subway tiles and Preston picking up trash. "Yes," Vivian said, winking. "I work for the airline. I'm just making sure everyone has a good flight." She walked back to seat 1. A sat down and looked out of the window as the engines roared to life. The storm was over. The horizon was clear, and this time nobody dared to tell her she didn't belong. And that is the story of how Vivian Banks turned a moment of disrespect into a billion-dollar lesson in humility. It's a powerful reminder that you never truly know who you are talking to. Brenda and Preston judged a book by its cover, a hoodie and sneakers, and paid the ultimate price for their arrogance. In the end, true power doesn't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes it just needs to sit in seat 24B and wait for the right moment to strike. What would you have done if you were Vivian? Would you have revealed yourself immediately? Or would you have waited to serve that cold, hard justice in the boardroom? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload dramatic real-life storytelling videos every week. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to everyone, because the person you disrespect today might be the one signing your paycheck tomorrow. See you in the next video.